Hey there, it's Mr. Stu. In today's lesson, I talk about 2 tough talks that you can have with your child. A tough talk is one of those talks that's necessary but uncomfortable. At the end of this lesson, you'll be a pro no matter what developmental level your child is at. Also, stay tuned at the end of this video for a special challenge to help you apply some of the tough talk material that we'll learn today. Let's check it out. We've reached the end, and now it's time to have some tough talks with children. Some tough talks about 2 topics that I think parents a lot of times avoid because they either don't know how to talk about it, they're afraid they might say the wrong thing, or various other reasons. The 2 topics that I think every child needs to hear about are sex and suicide. And I'm going to give you some practical tips to talk about sex and suicide with your child from birth to age 18, whatever age they are. I'm going to talk to you about how to have that tough talk with them. Those tough talks, those talks that are necessary but uncomfortable. Sex and suicide definitely fit into necessary and uncomfortable. We're going to talk about how to have appropriate conversation because of our child's developmental age. And we're going to talk about how to have consistent conversation so that that tough talk is not just a one-time event, but it's something that we allow our child to learn over time. Because sex and suicide are big enough topics to spend a lot of time talking about. And there's something we spend a lot of our lives trying to figure out, so a one-time talk is likely not going to suffice. To talk about having appropriate expectations for these talks and to talk about how to keep them consistent, we're going to be focusing on what's called Piaget's theory of cognitive development. You don't need to know any of that. The only reason I say that is so that you know that this is actually rooted in science. Piaget's theory of cognitive development for children. And by using Piaget's theory of cognitive development for children, we're going to learn how to have appropriate tough talks with our child, no matter which developmental age they are at. And we're going to learn how to make those talks consistent rather than a one-time event. Because if we wait until 16 to have the sex talk, or if we wait until 17 to have the talk about suicide, then maybe our child has already made some choices about those things that are going to be really difficult to step back on. So how do we talk to children about sex and suicide? Let's start where it all begins, birth to 2 years. Piaget says that this is what's called the sensory motor stage. In the sensory motor stage, the only way the child knows how to communicate is by using touch and by using their motion. So children will cry. Why? Because the only world they know is their body. If they feel hungry, they cry. If they feel tired, they cry. If they feel like something bumped them, they cry. Why? Because their whole world is wrapped up in their body. The way that they are touched and the way that they touch things is the way that those children communicate. How do we talk about sex and suicide to a child who is 2 years old or younger developmentally? Now remember, these are developmental ages, not physical ages. Your child could be 6 years old, but at a 3-year-old development. Your child could be 12 years old, but at a 15-year-old development. And you'll have to kind of figure that out. But let's just look at these rules from birth to 2 years. The way that we talk to our child about sex and suicide is the way that we touch them. If we are touching them in nurturing, gentle, loving ways, then that child is learning that their body is something to be nurtured and to love. And isn't that what sex and suicide are all about? Sex is all about the fact that not everybody gets access to your body. And suicide is that your body is precious and priceless, so we are not going to harm it. The way that you touch that child from 2 years old down is going to be the way that they set up to view themselves in the future. This is chosen as one of the most developmentally important moments in a child's life, developmentally important times in a child's life, that if they are 2 years old or younger and they are abused, it's much more likely to have a lasting impact, according to research. The way that we touch children from 2 years old down is the way that we communicate with them. What message are you sending your 2-year-old or younger child? Are you sending them the message that their body is precious, that their body is priceless, and not everybody gets to touch it? And are you teaching them that their body is precious, their body is priceless, And so we're going to treat ourselves in a way that is appropriate. If we do that, then we can start those consistent conversations at such a young age. If we're holding our child and saying, you are so beautiful, I love you, your body is precious, then we are setting up that consistent conversation with appropriate expectations. We are building secure attachment into our child using a tough talk. The next stage is what's called the pre-operational stage. This is from age 2 to age 7, again, developmental age. But from age 2 to age 7, this is the time that is so much fun. It's the time where your child is using their imagination all the time. Maybe they are turning a box into a car. Maybe they're building forts. Maybe they're deciding to play with swords and become a Jedi Knight with a lightsaber. Maybe they're using a broom handle to hit something that they're calling a piñata. They're drawing pictures of things that do not look like that's what they're saying those pictures are. They're using their imagination in enormous and creative ways. This is the time to start naming things, because this is the time where children are starting to understand what things are. Instead of just looking and pointing and crying at something, they actually say the word milk. Milk, I want milk. From age 2 to 7, they're starting to learn how to name it. And so it's important that we start to name things for our children in their bodies. It's important that children know what a penis is if they have one. It's important that children know what a vagina is if they have one. It's important for all children to know what their anus is. Here's a few reasons why that's important. It's important because they need to know the name for it, because I can't tell you how many CPS investigations I've gone out on where the child said they touched me in my hoo-ha, and we have to spend 20 minutes figuring out what a hoo-ha is. Do you want your child to say that somebody touched them in their hoo-ha, or do you want your child to be able to come to you and say, somebody touched my penis? Because those are two very different things. It's important for a young child to know the name of their genitals. You have to be the one that names it. It's important for this child to know that boys and girls typically have different parts. It's important for a little boy to know that most little girls have a vagina. It's important for little girls to know that most little boys have a penis. Now, that doesn't mean that we need to show them pictures or someone in person showing them what the other part is, but we can share with them, hey, I know that you have a penis. Girls have what's called a vagina. It's in roughly the same spot. And bodies are beautiful, incredible, amazing things. So because you have a penis and they have a vagina, we're going to stay away from that right now, because our bodies are like treasures. Think of the coolest treasure that you can think of. Yeah, buddy, isn't that such a cool treasure? Well, your body is kind of like that treasure. Now let's think, would you let just anybody come in and see that treasure? Would you let just anybody come in and get hold of that treasure? No? Okay, well, let's think of our body in that same way. Not everybody gets to just come and see all of the treasure. Not everybody gets to come and touch all of the treasure. So there are some of your body parts that are off limits. And bodies are beautiful, and because they're beautiful, we're not going to just let them out there for everyone to see, touch, and interact with. We're going to start naming things for our children when they're aged 2 to 7, because they are starting to learn. And we need to be the ones that educate them. We need to start having these consistent, appropriate talks with children about sex. This is also a great time where we can start building into children some affirmations. I am beautiful. I am strong. I am brave. I am blessed. There's my Kentucky coming out, because I am just all into this. I am. Tell those children that they can say out loud, I am beautiful. I am brave. I am blessed. I am loved. I can give love. Build those affirmations into your child. That's where we start the suicide talk. Because as children build their self-image, from this time, from age 2 to age 7, they're learning the terms to start talking about themselves. And so do we want to have a consistent, appropriate conversation with our child about their bodies, about sex, and about suicide? If we do, it's never too young to start. When they're age birth to 2, we want to focus on the way that we touch. From age 2 to 7, we're going to use imagination, and we're also going to start naming things. From age 7 to age 11, there's a phase that's called the concrete operations phase. This is the phase that say things don't change just because circumstances do. Children in this developmental stage, this is a great way to test it. If you take water and you pour it from one container to the other, does the child know that the same amount of water is in this new container? If you take a cookie and break it in half, does that child know it's not two cookies, it's one cookie that's been broken in half? If so, they are in the concrete operations stage, that things stay the same even when circumstances don't. This is the time to start asking the child questions, to start having conversation with the child, because they need to start seeing that, yes, you have said their body is beautiful, their body is a treasure, their body is something to be appreciated, loved, treated well. But maybe they went to school and their friends are not saying that. So can they take these things that they learned at home and be able to use them at school? This is the time to start asking them, what do you think about your body? What do you think about boys' bodies? What do you think about girls' bodies? You can start to ask them those questions. How do you feel about your body? What questions do you have about your body? The average age of exposure to pornography is during this phase. That's right, age 7 to 11 is the number one time where children have their first exposure to pornography. Why? Because they have questions that are unanswered. Are you going to be the one that answers their question, or are you going to allow the internet to be the one that answers their question? Let your child come to you with their questions about sex, about suicide, about their body, about all these tough topics, these topics that are necessary but uncomfortable. Let your child come to you. You can say, what questions do you have about your body? What questions do you have about boys? What questions do you have about girls? Have you ever thought maybe about hurting yourself? And that's a question that freaks parents out, huh? Because we think that if we start asking our children, do you feel good about yourself? Have you ever thought about hurting yourself? That will put that thought in their head. But just so you know, the research shows that asking non-suicidal people about suicide does not then make them suicidal. So you can ask your child. As a matter of fact, it has been proven that children who are consistently asked, not every day, not every moment, but consistently asked, have you ever thought about hurting yourself? Those children are less likely to commit suicide. Why? Because they have a consistent, appropriate adult that they can go to about those things. Are you going to be that adult, or are you going to let the internet be that adult? This is where we normalize the conversation. We say this conversation is going to be consistent, and it is appropriate for us to have this conversation. I know that your friends' parents probably aren't talking to them about this, but we're going to stay consistent. We're going to stay appropriate. We're going to have these tough talks, these talks that are necessary but uncomfortable. That's age 7 to 11. Then we have age 12 to 18, which is known as the formal operations stage. This is the stage where parents, you just want to grab your child and, right? These are the ages that most parents try to avoid. This is middle school and high school, and we just, our child a lot of times makes us want to rip our hair out. You know what the number one thing that makes us want to rip our hair out in this phase is the I know mentality. That's what formal operations says. It says, look, I know how that works. I'm able to think abstractly. You can give me a hypothetical. I already know how that's going to turn out. I know. So in this phase, because children believe they know, what we need to do is set them up to be the expert. Conversation is key in this time, and we need to let them be the ones that lead the conversation. We can start to ask them, what do you think about that? What do you think would happen if? Have you ever thought about what's your experience with? What would you like your experience to be with? You can start to ask them the questions, let them be the expert. And here's the great thing. If you've set up these consistent and appropriate conversations from the time that they were born until now, then it's not going to be weird for you to have this conversation with your child. But let's think really quick. If you have not had those conversations, maybe you've had some appropriate conversations, but they haven't been consistent. It's not too late to start now. Just because you didn't start with touching your child in a way that was appropriate and that was gentle and that was consistent, that showed them that their bodies are precious and priceless, and we are not going to just let anyone touch or see them. Maybe you haven't set that up. Maybe your child is 15 now and you are scared to death about having the tough talk. The best way to start is with a question. Not as walking in as the expert, but to walk in and say, you know what? I am so sorry that we have not had a more consistent time to talk about this. But it's important for us to talk about. I think we should talk about sex. Would that be okay with you? I think we should talk about sex. What do you already know? I think we should talk about sex. What do you think? We can set up this conversation with children that puts the ball in their court, allows them to be the expert, and allows them to guide the conversation because they may need something that we don't expect. They may already know something that we don't think they should have known. They may have been exposed to something that maybe we didn't even know that they were exposed to. So let's ask those questions. This is also a great time to play yes and. So whatever your child says, you can say, yes, and, oh, that's what you know about boys? Yes, and what else do you know? Oh, that's what you think about sex? Okay, and what else? We let them give us all of their information so that we can dissimulate it all and respond in a way that is compassionate, understanding, and gives our child trust. If we can do that, then tough talks are no longer one-time events that are terrifying, but they are consistent and appropriate conversations that we have with our child across their lifespan, where they know that we are the ones to come to about sex and about suicide and any other tough topic, those topics that are necessary but uncomfortable. So if we will have these consistent and appropriate talks with our children, if we will set them up to be conversations that are not one-time events, and if we will set up the conversation to be appropriate based on our child's developmental level, then we can say that no tough talk will be too tough. In today's lesson, you learned how to have a tough talk with your child, no matter what developmental level they're at. The challenge now is to identify where is your child in that developmental line, and what is one thing that you can do to start having those consistent and appropriate tough talks today. That's right, jump in on it today. That's your challenge. I'll see you next time, and until then, spread the word and share the love.